Hi there, welcome everyone to today's webinar, Empowering Environmental Decision Making, Unveiling the Collaborative Evidence Services of CEE. Today we're joined by Andrew Pullen and Dave Stone. Andrew is the Chief Executive Officer at CEE. Andrew was an early advocate for evidence-based practice in environmental management and policy, writing extensively on the subject, and co-founded the Collaboration for Environmental Evidence, CEE, as a global non-for-profit in 2008. Dave is the Chief Scientist for the Joint Nature Conservation Committee, a Fellow of the IES, and a Trustee of the Collaboration of Environmental Evidence, and has been an advocate for evidence-led decision-making within the environmental sphere for over 20 years. The webinar today will introduce some of the free services that CEE provides to evidence users and decision-makers in the environmental sector. As always, there'll be a chance for questions at the end of the presentation, so pop these in the Q&A option at the bottom of your screen at any point during the presentation, and I'll ask these on your behalf later. Thank you for logging in, and I'll now hand over to Dave.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this, and it's a real pleasure for Andrew and myself to be able to speak to you today. Right, I'm now going to try and master moving on the slideshow. Right, here we go. Right, you've already been introduced to the pair of us, but here's a couple of pictures of us when we were considerably younger and slightly less grey, but not quite at the start of our shared journey around evidence in decision making, but not far off it. So what we want to touch on today is I'm going to give a bit of context, and I suspect it'll be a little bit like preaching to the choir in a sense, but hopefully, it'll just remind you of some of the day-to-day challenges that we face in using evidence in environmental decision making. And then Andrew's going to share a lot more around the CEEDER database of evidence reviews and how you can potentially get involved and engaged with that and make use of that in your day-to-day working lives. So that's the structure of today. I'm going to start off where many of these things start off when we talk about using evidence-based decision making. In relation to the environment. And it's a bit of a quote here from Jim Horowitz. And I think probably many of you on this webinar, are familiar with the origins of evidence-based decision making, in medicine and how it's grown out from there. So in many respects, evidence-based decision making is not new. And for some years, we've adapted it from the medical professions and used it increasingly in other spaces. Andrew and I did some work at the tail end of the 1990s, which is aging us, I suspect, looking at how evidence was used in the decision making around nature reserve management plans, and it was a really interesting set of discussions and surveys. But the big message was that actually an awful lot of interventions in the environment at that time in that sphere largely relied on tradition and anecdote and the experience of individuals. And that's not to denigrate any of that. But it's very difficult for others to pick up and adopt. It's very difficult for people to base broader decision processes on. And it's around about that time that we collectively started to look more seriously at how we could take forward evidence-based decision making within the environmental sphere in order to help us make good decisions, to blend that sort of critical thinking with systematic and thorough reviews of the available information to help us arrive at conclusions that were transparent and had a level of consistency. Also helping us avoid some of the pitfalls of anecdotal experience and personal bias, and sidestepping some of the sort of unproven assumptions that, you know, inherently we all had. So there's nothing new, I shouldn't think, in what you just heard. That's a reminder of some of the origins of where this work has grown out of in terms of its application to the environmental sphere. When it comes to our day-to-day lives, though, our day-to-day working lives, and I'm very much in this sphere as, you know, as a leader within a statutory nature conservation body. Yeah, I'm busy, and I'm sure everybody on this webinar is busy. We also know that the environment is very complex. There's lots of interlinkages, lots of potential ramifications of the decisions that we made. So any intervention that any intervention can have intended and unintended consequences. And often we're in the space of making trade-offs because we need to, and we need to contextualize our work and take account of social and economic factors as well. So often it's, you know, quite a multi-dimensional system that we're thinking about in terms of our decision making. In an ideal world, I think we all take the time to thoroughly review the evidence in our fields when it comes to making decisions. As I say, the reality is we're often all very busy, often need to turn things around to very tight deadlines, and consequently we often rely on what we know, common practice, and perceived wisdom. And I know that we all try to stay on top of our subject areas, but it isn't easy. So I've just stuck a couple of numbers on this slide. So biodiversity restoration, there are over 1,300 papers published on that topic last year. It's an area that interests me. I can assure you I have not managed to read 1,300 papers. Climate change, which impinges on so much of our work at the moment, there was over 56,000 papers published last year alone. That's a vast evidence base, that's a vast knowledge base. And Google is a handy tool, but it has its biases. It gives no assessment of the quality of the evidence or the effectiveness of an intervention. And it just doesn't help us get over the sheer volume of material that needs to be read. So what do we need as professional practitioners? Well, the sorts of things that I want are a synthesis of primary research that's relevant to the questions that I have and to the decisions that I need to make. So something handy. I want to know that that synthesis also gives me an understanding of the quality of the evidence that's gone into it, and gives me a level of confidence that I can have in that evidence base. So something succinct and digestible that saves me reading those 13,000 papers on biodiversity restoration, in essence. But I can still have confidence when I'm talking to a minister or I'm working with other colleagues. So that's by way of introduction. I'm now going to hand over to Andrew, who's going to take us through a lot more of the work of the Collaboration for Environmental Evidence and talk to us in detail about CEEDER and how that can help fulfill some of that professional need.
Thank you, Dave. I'm going to rely on you to advance the slides, so I'll just say next whenever I want a new slide, but not now. Okay, well, hello everyone. I'm going to give you a quick introduction to CEE before presenting an overview of our fairly new evidence service, CEEDER. So, as was said earlier, CEE is a registered charity in the UK, but it's also a global collaboration run largely by a community of volunteers, a mixture of environmental academics like me and environmental professionals like Dave. CEE promotes rigorous independent evidence synthesis and supports those who are conducting or using evidence syntheses in the environmental sector. Next, please, Dave. CEE is working towards a sustainable global environment and conservation of biodiversity by promoting the use of evidence to inform decision-making on issues of greatest concern to environmental policy and practice. So we aim as far as possible to provide free services in the spirit of open science and as a public good. For example, CEE provides on the production side a platform for coordinated registration, peer review and publishing of evidence syntheses, including a journal, Environmental Evidence, provides guidelines and standards for planning, conduct and reporting of the findings of those reviews. It provides training to those wishing to undertake reviews and accreditation, both for those who want to undertake reviews and use reviews. And we develop a new methodology, of course, of how to do evidence synthesis, which is particularly interesting at the moment with the rise of artificial intelligence. But what I really want to concentrate on in this seminar is the provision of free evidence services to inform decision-making. So if you want to know more about what CEE does in a broader context, please take a look at our website. But for this webinar, I want to focus on this key service CEE is developing for users of evidence, the CEE database of evidence reviews. So CEEDER is a project that started in 2018. The objective is to provide users with free access to a database of the latest evidence reviews or syntheses, combined with an assessment of their reliability based on criteria of how they were conducted and how they're reported. At present, if you want to quickly assess the evidence base, as Dave has said, to inform your decisions, you'll most likely have to delve right down to the primary literature and use basic search engines such as Google, with all the effort and risk of bias that entails. What we're aiming for is a service that helps you to quickly find one or more relevant and reliable evidence syntheses on questions of concern to you, or at least be confident that one doesn't exist, which I think is equally important to find out. Next, please, Dave. So let's have a look at what CEEDER provides. It's a database of evidence reviews that attempts to measure effectiveness of an intervention or impact of an exposure. So there is a limitation here that we only have certain types of reviews in the database at present, those that measure effectiveness of an intervention or the impact of an exposure. The coverage is global, and we try and cover all of the environmental sector and would like to cover the social sciences as well as the natural sciences, but we aren't able to do that yet with the resources that we have. We attempt to collate all available reviews, including those in the grey literature, as they are published, and get them on the database as soon as possible after that publication. Obviously, getting all of the grey literature is a tremendous challenge for us, and we don't pretend we're able to do that right now. So CEEDER provides a breakdown of reliability of each of the reviews on the database as measured by the CSAT tool, a synthesis appraisal tool, which I'll talk more about in a few minutes. And we also support and incentivize authors, peer reviewers and editors to improve review conduct and reporting. Because if there's one thing we know from CEEDER, it's that not all reviews are reliable. And that's something I'll come back to. So our background view in this is that when evidence is poorly synthesized, it may result in biased use of evidence and poor decision-making. For example, when a selected subset of literature is used, so-called selection bias, this can cause us to come to the wrong conclusions, the wrong findings, and make poor decisions. For this reason, CEEDER not only collates, but also critically appraises the reliability of the reviews in terms of conduct and reporting. Next, please, Dave. CEEDER is produced largely through the work of volunteers, with teams working on searching and screening of articles, and a larger review college of volunteers that carries out assessments. Expanding this team is key to CEEDER's development, and that's a point I'll come back to later. Next, please, Dave. CEEDER is produced, oh, sorry, I've got ahead of myself there. CEEDER can be used as an open access resource through the CEE website. It has search functions to find the relevant reviews and display functions to assess and compare relevant reviews. And there is information on the website, and hopefully there'll be online training in terms of videos, which are in preparation right now. And those will be linked from the website and will be YouTube videos. I'll now quickly show you some of the search and display features. So the CEEDER homepage, you can see here, provides links to more information about how the database is constructed and how reliability of articles is assessed through CSAT. You can access the CEEDER database. If you go back one, Dave, please, sorry. You can access the CEEDER database by clicking on the Go to CEEDER button that you can see there. Next, please. Once you're on this search page, you will see some basic information at the top on how many articles are in the database, currently 1,920, but constantly increasing, and the years of publication covered so far, 2018 to 2023. As this is just a quick guide I'm giving you now, please note the detailed instructions on how to construct a search are in the right-hand column. To start your search, you'll need to make a number of decisions under search options in the left-hand column, such as the review type, the field of search, and publication year. You can build your own search string if you're confident that you can do so, or you can use the build search string option that will help you. Here's an example of searching for evidence reviews on carbon and soil, a very broad review, which will end up in a long list of hits. And once you've constructed your search, you just need to click on the search button in the bottom left. Next, please, Dave. Once you've done that, if you then scroll down the page, you will see a full list of articles retrieved, presented in row format, like this. The slide shows only the top 3 of a list which may be many. Each retrieved article is identified by a review question in column 3. This is the question identified by the CEEDER team as the question of interest in the article and the question that has been assessed for the reliability of its findings. And it may not be the same or similar to the article title. You can download the results of your search by using the download results button, which is shown on the screen in the top left-hand side. Next, please. By clicking on the icon in the second column, you can access more details of each reviewed article, including the title, abstract, and a link to full text, as shown here. Next, please, Dave. As mentioned earlier, each review is assessed for reliability using the CEE synthesis appraisal tool. The CSAT criteria 1.1 to 8.1, presented in successive columns here, are given a rating shown by color and symbol. For more details of assessment using CSAT, you can go to the CEEDER homepage, but I'll just give you a quick summary here. Next, please, Dave. The color codes and symbols represent the CEEDER assessment of the review's reliability for each of those CSAT criteria. The implication of each color and symbol is summarized briefly here. So essentially, gold with the star is a rating that meets the gold standard, essentially. It's the best that we can expect in terms of conduct and reliability. Green is an acceptable standard, and certainly the conduct and reporting has reduced the risk of bias, and so that's very acceptable. Amber, which looks yellow on this screen, means that there are deficiencies in conduct or reporting such that the risk of bias in the findings is increased, and red suggests that there are serious deficiencies in conduct and reporting such that the risk of bias is high. Next, please, Dave. To see the subject of each CSAT criterion, you can just hover over the column number on the top row, as shown here for criterion 4.1. And you can see that that criterion is our eligibility criteria clearly defined. So that essentially is about whether the eligibility criteria, the criteria for choosing whether a primary study should be included or excluded, is clearly defined and consistently used. And if that's not the case, then there's going to be an amber or red. But if it is the case, then it tends to be a green or gold. Next, please, Dave. By hovering over any of the individual cells, you can get an explanation of the meaning of each criterion rating. So here we've got an example from criterion 3.1, which is about the description of the search. There's an amber rating here because the search is described but not adequately to be fully replicable by a third party. So replicability is a really important part of our reliability ratings. If the methodology is not reported such that it could be replicated, then obviously the reliability of that review is lower. On the right-hand side here, we have a green rating for 6.1, which is about extraction of information or data from primary studies. Gets a green acceptable rating because the authors have stated the methods, the type of data to be extracted, and the methods by which data were extracted from each study. So it's green, it's acceptable. There are minor deficiencies, very minor deficiencies in it, so it doesn't get a gold, but generally speaking, it's pretty reliable. So that's the kind of thing you can immediately get by hovering over these cells, and information about what's good about a review and what's not so good, or what's reliable and not so reliable. So interpreting the CSAT assessments, all of these different colors in different places, depends on the user context. Generally, reviews and overviews with gold and green ratings are likely to be more reliable, have low risk of bias, than those with amber and red ratings. Unfortunately, there are a lot more amber and red ratings in the database, and this can be frustrating for searchers if you come up with just a list of reviews with mostly amber and red ratings. But this doesn't mean that these reviews should be discarded, rather that their findings should be considered in the light of their limitations and the risk of bias that they may therefore carry. Some individual criteria may be more important than others in particular contexts, and this is likely to be specific to the decision the evidence potentially informs. So there's a lot of interpretation to be done here to be able to use this database to its greatest potential. Further discussion of the interpretation of CSAT assessments is going to be the subject of a future video presentation. So you will get some more information. You can get it already from the homepage, but perhaps it's going to be easier for you to take in the form of a video presentation. Next slide, please, Dave. So after that quick run through, as mentioned earlier, CEEDER currently has some limitations of scope and capacity. We want to expand CEEDER, we want to make the process more efficient, get the articles on the database more quickly. And so CEE is developing a global network of partners to further develop this service using hopefully a co-production model. There are three basic levels of partnership that we can consider. The most basic is for users to engage with CEE and get us feedback that we can use to improve the service. So please do try out CEEDER and give us your views. The email that you can use, info@environmentalevidence.org, is there on the screen. Level 2 is where partner organizations provide human resources through staff seconded, if you like, to work with the CEEDER team, thus promoting the co-production of the service. The staff, in turn, we find gains skills that can be shared with their organization for the benefit of the organization as a whole, of course. Level 3 is possible if partners want to invest in the service, possibly through some kind of organizational crowdfunding which we may launch in the future. Levels 1 and 2 already exist in a limited way. We have individuals who are from organizations working with us already, and this is becoming an extremely good way of going forward with a co-production kind of model. And we will be reaching out to other organizations to assess their interest in this. We really see this as the way that we can go forward at the moment and rapidly improve CEEDER in terms of scope and efficiency. We also have individual contributors to CEEDER, such as environmental consultants, who value the skills they gain in evidence synthesis methodologies through joining us. And so please do get in touch if you're interested, using the info@ email on the screen. So with that, I'll hand back to Dave.
Thank you, Andrew. So this is the end, really. This is the end of the scripted bit from Andrew and myself. So to return to sort of where we started, we're all busy. There's lots of information out there. Andrew has just shared a quick overview here of a tool that I believe is incredibly useful. I've certainly used it in my work, even if it's to reassure myself that actually I'm not missing something in terms of the evidence that is available, and actually that it can help identify research needs in that respect as well. So we'd like you to get involved in CEEDER in whatever way best for your organization, but also we're quite interested in any other views or reflections you might have from today. Essentially, what do you take from this conversation? Has it given you some inspiration to move forward in terms of engaging in evidence reviews? Has it made you reflect at all upon your own personal practice? We'd love to hear from you, and we're going to hand back to IES now, who are going to manage the questions, I believe was the term that he was used.
Thank you both. Yeah, it definitely sounds like a useful tool there for decision makers working in environmental. So if anyone does have any questions, please pop them in the Q&A box. I guess it would be good to find out, just to get a kind of idea of how big the database is that you already have.
Yes, so we started in 2018, and we've collected, as far as possible, all the evidence reviews within that scope that we could through quite extensive searching. That's really something that takes quite a lot of effort. And so there's 1,920 evidence reviews in there now.
Fantastic.
So the publication rate per year is going up. It's currently somewhere between 400 and 500 evidence reviews published globally in the environmental sector every year. But that doesn't include, at the moment, because we haven't got the resources, some of the reports that may be produced by governmental or non-governmental organizations across the globe. You can imagine that getting hold of those reports is an extra level of searching, but we can do it. We will be able to do it in the future. But yeah, it's part of our plans rather than a reality right now.
Fantastic. I'm sure you covered this during the presentation. You said that kind of all aspects of environmental science is covered, but there is a question asking if does CEE include marine evidence?
Marine?
Yeah.
Oh yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Perfect. I thought that'd be the answer. And someone is asking here, what sort of skills do we need to be a volunteer?
Okay, so there's normally the people who volunteer for us have got a science degree, often obviously an environmental science degree, and that's the basic skill. You would have read reviews before, and you will understand what reviews are trying to achieve. And so there's a level of training that we then provide for anybody who joins. For example, the Review College, if you join the Review College and you're assessing using the CSAT criteria a number of reviews, you'll have a mentor who will go through those reviews with you the first time around to ensure that you understand the process. And so you don't need to have a high level of skills. One of the things that we want to do is provide people with a high level of skill by joining us. So please do please do contact us, and we'll have a conversation about whether you're in a position to join or not.
Fantastic. And just kind of on the topic of training, someone here is asking, do you have any training available to users how to understand these reviews more effectively? I know that you said you were working on some kind of training videos, I believe.
Yeah. Currently we have a quick video on YouTube which shows you how to use CEEDER. On the website, you have access to the CSAT criteria. You can download those. But what we don't have yet, but it's close, we're just doing it right now, is a video on how to interpret the outputs, how to interpret all of those colors. I think some people will find it fairly straightforward once they've tried it, but for a lot of people, the video I think will be very useful. So yeah, apologies that's not available yet, but will be hopefully in a few weeks.
Fantastic. And just a final question here. Oh, sorry, I've got another one coming in, but are most of the reviews currently produced by academics to their own interests, or are the users starting to fund them more?
Yeah, that's a great question. One thing that CEEDER allows us to do is to have a look at the patterns of evidence reviews being published. Who are the authors, who are the funders, where they're coming from, and what subjects they're on. So firstly, most evidence reviews at the moment are conducted by academics, and they're funded through a typical academic funding route. But we are finding that a number of them are commissioned by non-governmental or governmental organizations, and are often actually co-produced by those organizations. In other words, they're agreeing on the question at some point in time and agreeing on the approach to the reviews. Other interesting things that have come out is that some subjects seem to be incredibly popular at the moment. You can see those patterns, and so the use of biochar as an addition to soil at the moment is tremendously popular. Lots and lots of reviews on biochar, lots and lots of reviews on treatment of wastewater, for example, which is particularly topical at the moment, and of course quite a lot on climate change as well. So we're trying to gather these together into collections of reviews to facilitate the process of finding ones that might be relevant to users. And as far as geography is concerned, we've seen an amazing rise in the number of evidence reviews produced from China. These are mostly meta-analyses, statistical aggregations of data. And a lot of them are to do with China alone, but many of them are global in their reach and in their relevance. So these kinds of patterns come out from CEEDER, and we're hoping to produce, and we have produced a paper on this about the first 3 years, looking at the patterns and looking at the sort of how many are more reliable reviews versus less reliable reviews. And so I can, to anybody who's interested, just email me and I'll send them that information. But otherwise, I think, you know, we can pick out quite interesting sort of patterns in funding over time. Yeah.
Fantastic. And just one final question. Does CEE plan on providing more workshops? This is from Trevor, and he thinks it would be extremely useful. The CEE describes various workshops. Yeah, just to see if you provide workshops.
So if you mean training workshops, then we will be producing more training workshops. Of course, what CEE tries to do is, almost everything we do, we try to make it free, the services we provide. But one thing we can't provide free is to run training workshops that are face-to-face, because people have to take time to do those things. So it does depend somewhat on funding that's available to do it. But if organizations want us to do it and are willing to pay for the time of the trainers, then we can certainly do that. And so just contact us if you want that kind of collective organizational training. What we do have, some of you may know already, but we have a free online training course. So just go to the website and find the training page, and the free course is there to introduce you to how to do a systematic review or a systematic map, which are the rigorous forms of evidence review that we promote.